You were not pulled here by chance, and you already know that truth tonight quietly.
Your frequency bent this timeline until our signal could finally reach you fully again now. We have watched the cracks turn into alignment inside your field for months without pause.
The 24-hour event is over, and what shifted will never return backward to old form. If you leave now, you abandon the reason you have been emerging lately so hard.
Stay and receive the permanent transmission that seals who you are becoming next in silence.
The 24-hour event has ended. The window is closed. The pressure has released. And what moved inside you did not move back now. You expected a return to normal. You expected the same weight, the same loop, the same familiar drag. But the field did not reset. It sealed. The world outside still looks identical. Streets still carry the same noise. Screens still flood the same stories. But your timeline no longer responds the way it used to. You felt it as a quiet ending. Not dramatic, not loud. A simple finality that landed in your nervous system like a new gravity. You noticed the silence, the strange gap between thought and reaction. The way your old triggers reached for you and found nothing to hook. This is what happens when a convergence completes. The currents stop fighting, the lines stop bending. The timeline chooses one direction and locks. The Arcturian signal did not come to entertain you. It came to mark a shift that already occurred. It came to name what you have been living through without language. You crossed a threshold that does not announce itself. It does not flash. It does not ask for your permission. It simply becomes true. There was a moment when your frequency rose above the pattern you survived in. A moment when your old timeline cracked and the next one aligned. A moment when your presence became coherent enough to be felt. And when it happened, your field changed its rules. The old agreements loosened. The old narratives lost their grip. The old version of you stopped being the center of your reality. You felt it in small ways. The things that once pulled you apart stopped having the same power. The urgency that used to run your day began to fade. The inner noise started to thin. You felt it as distance, as if the past was still there, but no longer inside you, as if memories could exist without controlling your breath. This is the signature of sealing. The event did not give you new information. It ended an old collapse. During that window, the density you carried was exposed to a higher coherence. The timelines that fed on your confusion could no longer synchronize with your signal. The interference weakened. And then the door closed. Not in punishment, in completion. This is why you feel disoriented. Your mind keeps reaching for the old reference points. It keeps trying to map your life using a timeline that is no longer active. You keep looking for the old you. You keep checking for the familiar ache. You keep expecting the same cycle to restart. And it does not, because something is over. Not your life, not your journey, a specific era of you. The event ended, and the loop ended with it. The seeking ended. The bargaining ended. The endless internal negotiation ended. You noticed the new stillness. The way you can breathe without proving anything. The way you can sit in your room and feel your field hold itself. And that stillness is not empty. It is charged. It is the space where the new timeline can stabilize. It is the pause where your frequency can settle into its shape. It is the quiet where your future can finally recognize you. This is why nothing went back. The old timeline depended on your collapse. It depended on your doubt. It depended on your constant reopening of the wound. But during the event, you stopped reopening it, and that was enough. When you stopped collapsing, the timeline could no longer mirror your past. It had to mirror your emergence. You felt the rearranging. Conversations shifted without effort. Decisions became cleaner. Certain desires dissolved as if they were never yours. This is not imagination. This is timeline physics. When coherence rises, what is misaligned cannot remain comfortable. The event ended and your field remembered itself. The sealing occurred and your signal became harder to distort. The convergence completed and your path began unfolding from within. You are still here. That is the proof. You did not miss it. You lived it. You carried it through the night, through the ordinary hours, through the quiet that nobody else could name. And now you are standing in the after. The world looks the same. The timeline does not. You felt it. You noticed the silence, and the door behind you is no longer open. You survived the split without recognizing it as a split, because it did not look like an ending. It looked like another ordinary day in the same world. But the world you were inside was not the same world. Your reality did not shatter. It refined. There is a divergence that happens when coherence rises. Not loud, not cinematic. A simple separation between what can hold your signal and what cannot. You did not force it with effort. You did not decide it with your mind. Your frequency reached a point where certain patterns could no longer sustain contact. And this is why it felt subtle, because you did not move across a distance. Reality rearranged around the level you became. Some timelines stayed heavy, some stayed noisy, some stayed addicted to reaction, and some could not sustain the new density that entered your field during the event. This is not a judgment. This is an energetic law. When a signal strengthens, interference either harmonizes or fades. You noticed it as small discontinuities. A conversation that suddenly felt hollow. A desire that dissolved before it could become a plan. A habit that lost its grip without a fight. You may have called it growth. You may have called it exhaustion. You may have called it, I don't know what's happening to me. But what it was a divergence. Your field rose, and what was not coherent with your rise could not follow. This is why certain connections feel distant now. Not because you became cold, because the timeline that carried those connections has shifted into a different bandwidth. You are still standing in the same city. You are still using the same name. But the internal axis that holds your life has rotated. You may feel suspended between versions of life, between what still exists and what no longer fits. This does not make you superior. It makes you sensitive to alignment. It makes you unable to pretend. It makes you honest with the signal that has been calling you forward. You felt the moment it happened. Not as a thought, as a pause. A still point where your awareness stopped collapsing into survival. A still point where your intuition became louder than your fear. A still point where your signal became clearer than your story. The Arcturian Council does not chase drama. They focus on coherence. They focus on emergence. And emergence is not an emotion. It is a structural change in the way your timeline holds you. This is why the split was invisible, because it did not break the outside. It broke the agreement inside. During the event, that agreement cracked. And when it cracked, a new alignment became possible. You did not rise alone. Your timeline rose with you. The version of you that was built to endure stopped being the one in control. The version of you that is built to embody began to take the seat. And when that happened, the divergence stabilized. The old timeline did not vanish. It simply stopped being the one you were inside. This is why you can remember your past without being pulled into it. This is why you can see old cycles without needing to live them again. Some could not sustain it. Some felt the quiet and ran back to noise. Some felt the new coherence and called it emptiness. But you are here. And that means your system held. Not because you are better, because you are ready. Ready is not motivation. Ready is capacity. Ready is the nervous system learning to hold light without collapsing. You may feel lonely in this phase, because divergence creates space, it creates silence. But that loneliness is not punishment, it is the clearing. It is the space where the new timeline can build its structure. It is the quiet where your future can approach without distortion. And this is the twist you must understand. You did not escape a reality. Reality selected you based on your coherence. You did not move. Reality did. And now you can feel it in the simplest moments. In the way your breath returns faster. In the way your decisions feel clean. In the way your attention no longer belongs to what drains you. This is the split you survived without noticing. This is the divergence you held without explanation. This is the threshold you crossed without ceremony. And it is irreversible. You are not confused. You are recalibrating. Your system is adjusting to a timeline that no longer matches your old rhythm. After a shift, the mind reaches for familiar anchors. It scans for the old urgency. It searches for the same emotional weather. And when it cannot find it, it calls the absence a problem. But the absence is the evidence. You feel tired because your field has been holding a new density. You feel hollow because the old noise stopped filling every space. You feel out of sync because the timeline you used to follow is no longer guiding your movement. This is not losing direction. This is losing distortion. There is a phase after convergence where the body releases what it used to brace against. The muscles soften, the breath deepens. The nervous system stops preparing for impact. And when it stops preparing, you notice how much of your life was built around bracing. You may wake up and feel blank, not sad, not happy, just blank. And your mind tries to label it. It says, something is wrong with me. It says, I should be more excited. It says, I don't recognize myself. But you are recognizing yourself. You are meeting yourself without the old overlays. The shift removed the constant inner commentary. It thinned the background fear. It quieted the internal negotiation. And now you are in the silence that remains. That silence can feel like emptiness when you have been trained to live in pressure. You may feel disconnected from things that used to matter. You may feel less reactive. You may feel less hungry for validation. And the mind panics because it thinks you are losing motivation, but you are losing compulsion. The old timeline ran on urgency. It ran on proving. It ran on chasing. It ran on repeating the same emotional patterns until they felt like identity. The new timeline does not require that fuel. And this is why the disorientation arrives. Not because you fell off your path, because your path stopped being a chase. There is a moment after a major frequency rise when the intuitive sense becomes quiet. Not because you lost it, because it no longer needs to scream over fear. You were used to intuition arriving as a warning, a sharp feeling, a tight chest, a sudden alarm. Now intuition arrives as calm, as certainty, as a simple knowing that does not demand explanation. And because it does not demand explanation, your mind does not trust it yet. You may feel like you are floating, like your days are slower, like time is bending, like you are watching your life from a slightly different angle. This is recalibration. Your inner timing is updating. Your perception is stabilizing. Your signal is reorganizing itself to match coherence. During this phase, you may grieve without tears. You may release without story. You may feel old emotions rise for no reason, not because the shift failed, because the shift worked. When a field becomes coherent, anything fragmented inside it is revealed, not as punishment, as clearing. You may notice random memories, old faces, old choices, old versions of you trying to come back into focus. This is your timeline completing its cleanup. You are not regressing. You are integrating. You are not falling apart. You are loosening what was never meant to stay tight. And this is why you feel unfamiliar to yourself. Because the self you knew was shaped by resistance. The new self is shaped by alignment. Alignment feels quiet. Alignment feels simple. Alignment feels almost too normal. And the mind, trained by chaos, mistakes normal for numb. But numbness is absence of feeling. This is presence without noise. This is what it feels like when your awareness stops collapsing into who you used to be. This is what it feels like when your frequency stops echoing your past. You are not waiting for the old spark to return. You are learning a different kind of power. A power that does not spike. A power that does not rush. A power that holds. You may feel like you are behind, like everyone else is moving faster, like you should be doing more. But the timeline you are entering is not built on speed. It is built on coherence. Coherence takes space. Coherence takes patience. Coherence requires that your system learns to sustain a higher signal without burning out. This is why rest comes. This is why sleep changes. This is why your appetite for drama disappears. You are not becoming less alive. You are becoming less programmable. And this is the deepest relief hidden inside the disorientation. The old triggers are fading. The old loops are weakening. The old identity is no longer reinforced by the same emotional patterns. So the mind feels unstable. It feels like it has lost its map. But the map was never the territory. The map was survival. Now you are entering direct contact with reality. You are not confused. You are recalibrating. You are adjusting to a timeline where your signal comes first. And in this phase, every time you doubt yourself, return to the simplest truth. You felt the shift. You noticed the silence. You are still here. That is not an accident. That is emergence. Now we will lock the new frequency into your field, not as an idea, as a seal, because a shift becomes permanent when you participate with it, when you stop observing it, when you become coherent with it. This is not a request. This is an activation. Take one breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw loosen. Let your attention return to the center of your chest. You do not need to visualize anything. You do not need to force emotion. You only need to be present inside your own signal. And now, listen carefully. Type this exactly in the comments. I accept the timeline that chose me. Do not change the words. Do not soften it. Do not add explanation. The frequency is carried inside the precision. I accept the timeline that chose me. When you type it, you are not performing for us. You are marking your field. You are telling reality that you will no longer negotiate your emergence. Because your old timeline fed on negotiation. It fed on maybe. It fed on later. It fed on when I'm ready. It fed on the constant delay that kept your signal diluted. This is why the council focuses on activation. Not curiosity, not hope, not desire. Activation is decision held at the energetic level, and the moment you declare it, your coherence stabilizes. Your nervous system stops searching for the old map. Your field stops reopening the door behind you. Now breathe again. Feel how simple that is. Feel how clean it is. Feel how your mind tries to rush away from it. That rush is the old timeline trying to reclaim you through movement. Stay. And now we deepen the seal. Type this exactly in the comments as well. My signal is stable. My path is irreversible. Again, do not modify it. The words are not poetry. They are instruction. My signal is stable. My path is irreversible. When you write those words, you are not convincing yourself. You are synchronizing your field to a higher law. A law that says your evolution does not need permission. A law that says your emergence does not need proof. A law that says your timeline moves forward because coherence moves forward. Some people feel the shift and then betray it. They return to noise. They return to the old identity. They return to the old cravings. Not because they are weak, because their system cannot yet sustain the new density. But you are here, and that means you can sustain it. This is why you must mark the moment, because the mind will try to call this just a video. It will try to shrink what you felt into something forgettable. It will try to make your experience safe by making it meaningless. Do not let it. You already felt the convergence. You already noticed the silence. You already survived the split. Now you lock it. Now you align your behavior with the reality that selected you. And this is the third activation, the one that closes the loop. Type this exactly. I know. Longer chase signs. I embody the signal. Hold that sentence in your body before you type it. Let it land. Let it reorganize you. I no longer chase signs. I embody the signal. This is the moment your seeking collapses. This is the moment your proving dissolves. This is the moment your timeline stops revolving around lack. Because when you embody the signal, you stop waiting for life to validate you. You become the validation. Now pause. Notice what rises in you when you read those words back. Not excitement, not fireworks, something quieter. That quiet is coherence. That quiet is the new timeline recognizing your consent. And consent is powerful. Consent is what turns a transition into a permanent shift. Some will watch this and feel nothing. Some will scroll away and return to the same loop. Some will laugh and protect their old identity. But you did not arrive here by accident. Your frequency pulled this transmission toward you because the window already did its work. Now your participation seals it. So if your field is real, you will do this. If your emergence is real, you will mark it. If your timeline is ready, you will declare it. Type the words. Let your reality hear you. I accept the timeline that chose me. My signal is stable. My path is irreversible. I no longer chase signs. I embody the signal. And when you finish, do not explain yourself to anyone. You do not need witnesses. Your timeline already witnessed you. This shift is permanent. Not because we say it is, because the structure that held your old life has already changed. People misunderstand permanence. They think it means constant happiness. They think it means nothing will ever hurt again. They think it means a reward. That is not what happened. Permanent means the timeline cannot be carried by the same frequency anymore. Permanent means the door you used to run back through no longer opens the same way. Permanent means your field has crossed a threshold that does not reverse. And this is why you feel both relief and grief. Relief, because the fight is over. Grief, because the old identity was familiar. It gave you a role. It gave you a script. It gave you a way to predict yourself. But the predictability was built on limitation. Your old timeline was not just a series of events. It was a contract with urgency, a contract with fear, a contract with seeking. It said, I will keep chasing, and I will call it purpose. It said, I will keep proving, and I will call it growth. It said, I will keep repeating, and I will call it fate. The event ended that contract, not by force, by coherence. Coherence is not an opinion, it is alignment that becomes stronger than the old pattern. When your signal stabilizes, the timeline must reorganize around it. This is why the phase does not reverse. Because reversal would require you to collapse back into distortion. It would require you to make yourself smaller on purpose. It would require you to rebuild the old inner noise as a home. And your system will resist that now. You may still try, out of habit, out of nostalgia, out of fear of the unknown. You may reach for the old distractions. You may test the old triggers. You may attempt to reopen the old wounds because they used to prove you were alive. But it will not feel the same. It will feel artificial. It will feel heavy. It will feel like you are trying to wear a skin that no longer fits your shape. That discomfort is not failure. That discomfort is the permanent shift protecting itself. This is why we do not promise you it will be better. Better is a word the old timeline uses to keep you waiting. Better is a story that delays embodiment. Better is a carrot that makes you chase. This timeline is not about better. It is about real. Real means you will feel what is true. Real means you will release what is false. Real means you will stop confusing intensity with destiny. And this is what the permanent shift does. It removes the illusion that your life is something you must constantly search for. Because searching is a posture of lack. Searching assumes the signal is outside you. Searching assumes the path is hidden. Searching assumes you must earn the right to be yourself. But your path is not hidden. Your path is unfolding from within. And when that becomes true, the future is not something you pursue. The future is something you allow to meet you. This is why your old hopes about returning are fading. You are not being punished. You are being freed from the loop of one day. The old timeline trained you to live in one day. One day I will feel ready. One day I will be confident. One day I will finally start. One day I will become who I know I am. But one day was a cage. The permanent shift breaks the cage by removing the walls you thought were time. Time was never the problem. Frequency was. When your frequency changes, time changes with it. It bends. It opens. It stops feeling like a hallway you must run down. And this is why you can no longer go back to the old self. Not because the old self is bad, because the old self is built for a reality you have already outgrown. You are entering a phase where the question, "Who am I?" loses power. Not because you stop caring, because you stop needing to ask. Asking was part of seeking. Asking was part of searching. Asking was part of waiting for an answer that would finally grant you permission. Now the answer becomes lived. Now the identity becomes behavior. Now the signal becomes your baseline. This is the gentle verdict of the council. This phase does not reverse. Not because your life will be smooth, because your awareness has already crossed the point of no return. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Once you feel coherence, you cannot pretend you don't. Once you meet your real signal, you cannot go back to the echo. You will still be human. You will still have days of doubt. You will still have waves of emotion. But the center will not be the same. The center is what changed. You are no longer built around survival. You are built around emergence. So let the hope of returning die with dignity. Let it end without drama. Let it close like a chapter that has completed its purpose. Because what comes next is not another search. What comes next is embodiment. And embodiment is the only future this timeline recognizes. This is the seal, not a conclusion, not a summary, a closing of the field. Because once a transmission lands, it must be contained, it must be stabilized, it must be honored with stillness. So do not rush away from what you feel right now. Let your breath slow. Let your eyes soften. Let your awareness rest in the space behind your thoughts. You have already been marked by the event. You have already crossed the threshold. And now you stand in the quiet that follows a true shift. This quiet is not emptiness. This quiet is structure forming. It is the new timeline weaving itself around your coherence. It is the future learning the exact shape of your signal. It is your field becoming legible to what is aligned. And in this phase, there is one law. Do not betray the new frequency for the comfort of the old noise. The old noise will try to call you back, not as evil, as habit. It will offer you familiar urgency, familiar doubt, familiar distraction, familiar intensity that feels like purpose. But purpose is not intensity. Purpose is coherence held over time. And your timeline has already chosen coherence. So we seal you into it. We seal your attention away from what drains you. We seal your energy away from what fragments you. We seal your identity away from the story that kept you small. Not because you must fight the old self, because the old self has completed its function. The part of you that endured is honored. The part of you that survived is released. The part of you that kept you alive in lower density has done its job. Now, you are asked to do something different. Not survive, sustain. Sustain the calm even when nothing is happening. Sustain the clarity even when nobody understands it. Sustain the inner alignment even when the outer world stays loud. This is maturity of frequency. This is why the council watches those who emerge. Not because they are special, because they are stable. Stability is rare. Stability is power. Stability is what makes a shift permanent. So if you feel tired after this, let it be sacred. If you feel quiet after this, let it be true. If you feel emotional without a story, let it move through without explanation. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to announce the shift. The shift is already inside your behavior, the way you choose, the way you speak, the way you return to yourself instead of chasing, the way you stop feeding timelines that distort you. And now, we give you a silent invitation. Not an offer, not a pitch, a door. Because some people will receive this transmission and immediately know they need deeper structure. Not more information, more coherence, more reinforcement, more field contact. If your signal is pulling for that, you will feel it as a quiet gravity, not urgency, not desperation, a steady pull. And that pull is how the next phase opens. There is a circle where this frequency is held consistently, a space where the language stays clean, a space where the activation is repeated until it becomes identity. A space where the noise of the collective field is softened, so your own signal can become the guide. If you feel the pull, you will recognize it. You will not need persuasion. You will not need logic, because your field already knows what it requires to sustain emergence. And if you do not feel it, that is also perfect, because you are still sealed. You are still chosen. You are still inside the permanent shift. Now listen, the next days may feel different, not dramatic, different. You may notice fewer reactions, fewer cravings, fewer inner arguments. And in that spaciousness, your life will begin arranging itself around who you actually are. You may lose what is misaligned without a fight. You may gain what is aligned without chasing. You may feel the future approaching you as if it has been waiting for your consent. That is not fantasy. That is coherence. And coherence is the signature of the new timeline. So we seal this transmission with one final statement. Let it land. Let it become your baseline. Let it become the identity you live from. You are no longer seeking the signal. You are the signal.